There's only a few slides left, and we're taking a pretty different tack on this. So stay with me for this part. We've got 8 slides to get through, but this is color management, color managed workflow in its essence. So, okay. So the problem that we have with color. RGB, CMY, HSB, all of these are derived from RGB. You can't really just invent HSB. They take the RGB system and they pull that information out of it. So consequently, any limitation that RGB has is a limitation that they all have. And this is it in a nutshell right here. Every device, every eyeball, every sensor, every monitor, etc., has a slightly different definition of RGB. So I know you guys have seen this before. You go to, the Best Buy and there's 1,000 television screens up, and they're all, they're all showing basically the same thing, but there's slight differences in that. You might be surprised to know that your eyes actually see slightly different versions of color. It's all mixed together in your mind, so you don't really perceive that part. You don't think of one eye as being, oh God, I've got a yellow cast here and a green cast over here. I mean, you don't think of it that way, but again, every single one of these, they call it device dependence. And what they mean by that is that the device itself is trying to interpret the color. And it's trying to interpret it in a way that it'll actually show you what it thinks you want to see. But there are inherent limitations in all of these devices. The phosphors that they use for this one were a little bit different. The ink that we use in the printer, the mix was a little bit different. The printer itself is laying the stuff down a little bit different. The difference in how one paper absorbs ink and another, all of those are considered device dependence. And so what we need to do is come up with a way to eliminate that. If we need a color managed workflow, if I want to be able to print out what I see on my screen, we need to eliminate the devices, as it were. We need to eliminate the influence of the devices. That's a better way of putting it. Does that sort of make sense, everyone? And so this is sort of what it's going to actually look like. There's an infinite number of tri-stimulus color spaces. Again, there's, I don't know how many billions of people on Earth. Most of them have 2 eyes. And so they're right off the bat, there's 12 billion, devices. There's millions of monitors. They all have their own. There's millions of sensors and cameras. They all have their own. All of these are unique. And we need to eliminate that uniqueness. We need to create a commonality amongst them all so that we have a way then to move from one space to another space predictably and end up with the same results. Make sense? So that's kind of the holy grail here. Okay, device-dependent color. RGB values that produce the exact desired color on one device will produce a slightly different value on another device. That's the problem that we've got in here. RGB values are monitor-dependent. HSB values are also monitor-dependent. CMYK values are printer-dependent, and on and on and on. So the way they fixed this problem, back in the 30s, a bunch of people got together in Paris and they invented what they call the CIE, which is something in French, and I don't speak French, so I'm not even going to try. But what ultimately came out of it was what we consider to be ICC today, International Color Consortium. And again, while we talk about ICC profiles, this was the method that they came up with to take care of this problem. So their first thing to do was to create what they call the standard observer. And what it does is it represents the response of an average human eye. So they took thousands and thousands of people and got them together and tested how their eyes saw this stuff. They took all of those numbers and averaged them to create an artificial human being that they could define the color. How does the standard observer see color? And in doing so, they eliminate all the people. They've just got this one thing, and that one thing is a consistent standard, and they can then measure everything against the standard observer and then create corrections so that my monitor shows me what the standard observer would see. My printer prints what the standard observer would see. Does that make sense, kind of what's going on here? It'll make sense hopefully in a little bit more. It was based on color matching experiences, and again, this is the CIE. So we are going to look at 3 situations here. Actually, let me go back. let's do this one at a time. Okay, so I've got a file. It's just a Photoshop file on my computer. And in it, it's got this color. And it's this color right here. And by definition, this color is 255 red, 148 green, and 21 blue. Everybody good on this part? So I put this on my uncalibrated monitor. And my monitor shows me this color. Now, is this color and this color the same? Not even close. And that's the problem. So my monitor's actually showing me a red that's 255, but a green that's 248, and a blue that's 53. They are not the same color, and that is the problem. However, if I calibrate and profile my monitor, I'm going to put a little calibration guy on there, and it's going to actually measure this, and what it's looking for is to say, well, what's the difference? So it's looking at this and it's measuring it. Again, it's a hardware thing, looks just like this, and it's measuring it and it's saying, well, okay, they got the red right. The file called for 255, the screen is showing it 255 red, so we don't need to do any correction here at all. However, when it comes to the green, the file is saying I want a 148 green and the monitor is giving me a 248. This hardware understands that and says, okay, to correct for this, we need to knock 100 green off. Is this clicking for everyone? And then finally, in the blue, the file is asking for a 21 blue. The monitor is giving it almost twice as much blue, even more than twice as much blue. So again, the hardware system understands this and says, oh, well, it's too much blue. We need to knock 32 blue off. And so in the end, if you have your monitor plus its profile, a calibrated monitor plus its profile, the correction is made. And this monitor is now showing you exactly what the file is calling for. Are there questions about this? Because this is the process how all of your profiling works. So this is how you deal with your monitor. This is how we will deal with a sensor, and this is ultimately how you deal with a printer. Are we good on this part? Are any questions about this part? What's happening here, that process? So, profiles. Profiles are, again, the data that's representing the reproduction characteristics of a device. What it's really looking for is it's measuring the derivation from a known value. So when we go to do these things, typically to generate a profile for this, there's a software-hardware combination part. The software puts out a color, and it knows exactly what the color is. The hardware measures the response, whatever the monitor shows us, and then the software calculates the difference in the two, generates what they call a lookup table to actually turn your monitor into a standard observer. Yes? You don't know that. No, the thing is that the only vision that you know is your own vision. It's like taste is the same way. You know, you've never really, what's the most sour thing you've ever had? Well, it could be sugar. If that's all you'd ever had in your life was sugar, sugar would be the sourest thing you'd ever tasted. So there's no, you know, I always think about this too. Are you guys, you know, what I perceive is like your red mask, do you perceive it as what I would think green would be? There's no way for us to have that conversation because it's always that way for you and for me. Yes?
I just have another thing piggybacking off that, because like blue light glasses, when you're looking at a monitor,
yes.
what I have wearing right now, does that?
Oh, no, it has a huge impact on it. And actually, don't let me forget that when we talk about calibrating a monitor, help me go through that part. Anyway, profiles adjust for that derivation, and they also give you the ability to then translate between spaces. So I can go from a monitor to a printer. Profiles allow that to actually happen. And they do it using working spaces. Now again, we've heard a lot about spaces here, but we're now getting hopefully to some familiar ground. In Photoshop, they're called profile conversion spaces. They are just called working spaces in Photoshop. By definition, they are device independent. Critical here. You do not worry about devices because these are theoretical spaces. We know them as ProPhoto RGB, Adobe RGB, sRGB. These are all working spaces, but they are not, they were never created on a device. They are never about a device. They are a mathematical model of a color space. And the beauty of it is that all of ours are the same. My Adobe RGB is the same as yours. So if I give you a file that I've had in Adobe RGB and you open up yours in Adobe RGB, it will be identical. There is no changing that will be happening there. So again, the diagram we're going to see in just a second, I'll explain this a little bit better. Working spaces are universal, meaning they are identical on every computer. This is really, really critical that it allows file exchange. So here it is in a nutshell. I'm going to describe what's basically going on here, and then we're actually going to start working on some stuff. So color managed workflow. How do we really do it? So I'm going to start on the left side over here, and you can see I've got a scanner profile up at the top and a camera profile. You can do this using scanners or cameras. Most of you guys are not scanning anything. If you are, you can do a profile for your scanner. But I'm going to do the camera one specifically. So it starts out with a camera. The sensor in your camera is device dependent. The way it responds to color is unique to that sensor, not to that sensor line. So two models of the exact same camera will see color in two completely different ways. Well, it's not radically different, but very different ways. So the sensor that you build, if you've got two 5D Mark IIs, the sensor that you build for one is not going to work for the other one. Again, these are specific to the device, but we build a sensor profile for that sensor, and it then gets rid of the deficiency, the discrepancy in color. It undoes it, and it basically creates a version of the file that the standard observer would see. So it gets rid of, it undoes whatever deficiency. Sensors can be overactive in certain areas and underactive in other areas, whatever, that gives you a perverted color rendition. This handles that and gets rid of that problem. We take that and we bring it into what they call ingesting software, input software. This would be Camera Raw. This would be Lightroom. Anything that's actually going to take raw data and process it. The color correction happens when you bring it into this space. Then we can do all sorts of other things in here as well, but nonetheless. Then once while you're in Photoshop, if you say then I'm going to then bring this file into Photoshop, you know, you're in Camera Raw and you're ready to open it up into Photoshop, that's this phase of the game right here, and this is where the working spaces exist. This is where Adobe RGB would be, or ProPhoto or sRGB. We set these spaces last week. Remember the color settings that we did? And we said specifically we wanted Adobe RGB to be our color space. This was saying what we want right here. This is a profile conversion space as well. So if I want to then look at this file on my monitor, I need a profile for my monitor to get rid of the discrepancies that my monitor will introduce so that I see the same thing as the standard observer. But also, if I want to print this on any of these printers, I go through a conversion profile to correct it so that the printer shows me what's on the monitor, that shows me what my camera captured, that shows the real thing. Is this making sense to everybody? Are there questions about this whole process? Are we good on this? So if you do this, you end up with manageable, predictable, translatable color. How many people in this room, who prints? Does anybody print? Ooh, I love that. I love prints. How many of you guys struggle with your printing? How many people in here take a file and simply print it and have it be perfect? I'm trying to, I know this is long, I know this is dry, I know this is dull. But if you embrace this, you will do, occasionally I'll do a second print, something I won't be happy with the contrast a little bit, or I might want to tweak some, whatever, but for the most part, it's one and done and that's it. I don't do test strips. Every time I go to do a mural print, they say, do you want a test strip? And I go, why? If my color is that off, why in the fuck am I spending all this money on this giant-ass mural print if I haven't gotten it down better than that, right? So anyway, that's the grail here. That's what we're going to go for here. So this is it. Before we finish this, though, the one last thing that I wanted to ask you guys about is color temperature. We've all heard of it. What is it? So the way they came up with color temperature is this, and this part actually matters because you'll hear it always referred to in degrees. So there was Celsius, and he came up with a Celsius scale where 0 is ice and 100 is boiling water. Then there was Fahrenheit. He came up with 32 degrees was ice and 212 degrees was boiling water. But then there was a guy whose name was Kelvin, and he came up and he said, you know, this minus plus thing, why are we actually doing any of that? We shouldn't be playing with that scale at all. What we should think about is energy. So things like water, things like wood, all that kind of stuff, it's all made up of molecules. And molecules are sort of like slowly moving around. But I'm going to do water as the example. If you take water molecules just at room temperature, they're moving around a little bit, they're bumping into each other, they're fluid, they're that kind of stuff. That's sort of like what's happening. If you start to add heat to that water, those molecules start getting agitated and they move much faster. They bang into each other much more, and eventually they will boil and the molecules actually will escape up into the air. So much energy in it. If you go in the other direction, if you, again, they're mulling around here at room temperature, whatever, and you start to take energy away, you put it in the freezer and you make it colder, they slow down. Well, what Kelvin figured out was that what happens if you remove all the energy? If there's 0 energy in there, you have no heat, there's no movement, there's no nothing, you can't get any colder than that. There's nothing left to remove. He called that 0 degrees Kelvin. At 0 degrees Kelvin, roughly on a scale of Celsius, it's about minus 276 degrees Celsius. That's about where it happens. There's no energy left, meaning that not only is there no heat, but there's no light. It's as black as you can get. There is no energy. Can't get any blacker. So that's 0 degrees Kelvin. You take that, they call it a theoretical black body. There's a bunch of names for it, but nonetheless, you start to heat it up. When you get up to around 2,500 degrees on the Kelvin scale, that black body starts to glow. And it glows, it's like an orangey glow. As you continue to add more and more heat, it starts to move towards blue. And by the time you get up to like 95 degrees, or like 9,000 degrees Kelvin, whatever, you have a very blue light. So what it's really giving you is a color range that goes from yellow oranges to sort of blue cyans. Right in the middle here at 65 degrees Kelvin, these things neutralize each other out. 65 degrees Kelvin has no color cast. Again, these are complementary colors in effect. They're not really, but basically that's what happens. They cancel each other out, and so at 6,500 degrees Kelvin, you have no tone. There's no cast in it. So what are these other numbers? 2,500 degrees Kelvin is old school incandescent light bulb that your mom and dad still probably have in their house, that you may even have some as well. 9,000 degrees Kelvin is the top of Mount Everest on a brilliant blue day, not a cloud in the sky, because a lot of that blue from the atmosphere is kicking into the color of where you are, and that's why it's really blue. When Apple ships their new laptop to you, they have the color temperature of that laptop set around 9,000 degrees Kelvin. So unless you calibrate your monitor, you are looking at a really blue image. To fix it, you start putting in a lot of warmth to control all that blue, and then you go to print it out and your print looks really yellow, and you go, why? And it's because your monitor's been lying to you the whole time. They do it for the same reason you have your blue glasses. It makes things seem contrastier, it makes them seem clearer, and it makes them seem more saturated. And that's what Apple wants. It wants you to, pick up, look at the pictures of your kids and go, oh my God, they've never looked this alive. Right? But for us, it's the worst thing in the world. So at any rate, color temperature matters here, specifically this 6,500 degrees right here. Make sense? Yes?
When you talk about like color temperature on a monitor, like what's the ideal then for like brightness on your monitor?
Perfect segue. If in 10 minutes you don't know the answer to that, I will have failed. Okay, are there any questions about this? All right, the last slide. So I'm going to start by, actually calibrating my monitor. Now, the problem is, you guys, how can I do this? You guys will, here, hang on. You won't see this on, you'll see it on the recording, on the screen here. You'll see what's actually happening on the projector, but when I go to try to profile this thing, it's not, the projector's got its own. If I wanted to profile the projector, I would profile the projector. So what you're going to see, you won't see the changes necessarily happen on the projector because it's doing its own, but you will see them on my screen when we're sort of finished with this. Okay, does that sort of make sense? Okay, so this is what you need to get. This is an i1 display. They have an i1 Studio. That you don't need to buy this thing. It's about 250 bucks. They have 3 or 4 of them in the media center, the place where you picked up your Wacom tablet. This only takes like 10 minutes to do. You don't even have to check. I mean, you need to check it out, but you could literally calibrate and profile your monitor while you're standing there and hand it right back to them. But at any rate, they used to have Color Monkeys, which is made by the same company. It's a dumbed down version of this. Do not use them. They tend to skew yellow, so I wouldn't use that. This is definitely the guy to use. If you're in the photo studio, they've got one in the photo studio as well. They have the software that goes with it, and you want to use the software that actually is with it, because trying to go to X-Rights, that's the company that makes this thing, trying to go to their website and find the right software, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. So simply load the software. There'll be a little thumb drive that has the software on it. Load there. Again, there's an i1 display. There's also an i1 Studio. Those are 2 different softwares. They look exactly the same, but it's 2 different softwares. Make sure you're using the right one, because if you've got the wrong software, it won't work. I mean, you don't need to worry about making a bad profile. It just won't work. Make sense? We good on this part? Okay, so the trick to this is, one of the tricks, and there's a number of things to it, is that you want to plug this thing into the USB port before you launch the software. It's going to look for this thing, and if it doesn't find it, this was, at least in the older versions of software, you would go through the entire process, and you would get to the very end, and then your computer would crash, and the profile wouldn't load or wouldn't save or whatever. So it's just really frustrating to spend the time and not have this thing work. But, so I'm going to plug this in. There's a little counterweight on the back. I'm going to actually demonstrate on this guy right here so you can sort of see what I'm doing. I'll do it in reverse. So imagine this is my screen. You actually put this thing over, and then this counterweight just lets it hang there. However, when you do this, you want to make sure that your screen is tilted back so that this thing rests firmly against it. Like here, you can see this is actually not against this guy. You would actually have to rotate this like this so that it's pressed firmly against it. Make sense? Okay. And then this is the software you load. I need everybody to do this for your laptops by next week. The profile is called, the software is called i1 Profiler. And you get this i1 Profiler app and then this tray thing. I've never known what the tray thing is about. It's some sort of, I'm sure, automatic thing that maybe you can do. A lot of people can do. I mean, you can do like a lot of monitors sort of at once, that sort of thing. But anyway, so this is going to open up. Hopefully. And you can see that we can profile a number of things. You can profile displays, which is what we are going to do, projectors, printers, and scanners. Now this little puck, the one I'm showing you right here, will do a display. It will also do a projector, but this will not do a printer or a scanner. We do have the thing that will do printers and scanners. It's also in the media center. It's a much larger item than this. We will look at doing a custom profile for your printing later. But so this will be fine for your display profiling. So I'm going to click on display and drag this wider. it has a pretty good set of instructions over here to go through. At any rate, in this case, it's interesting because usually I end up with two things right here. I end up with the projector as well as this, but I'm only getting my screen right now. That's fine. I'm going to just leave this at my screen. There is a drop-down menu here. I strongly suggest you do not screw with this drop-down menu. It actually goes in and it looks at the color technology of your screen. So there's older screens like CRTs that have a different technology. There's older LED versions. So anyway, leave this at its drop-down. You'll see there's other options that you can get in here, but I'm going to leave this at its drop-down. The white point here, this goes back to the conversation that we had about color temperature. You have to set this at D65. This stands for daylight 6,500 degrees. You'll also notice that this is listed here as the CIE Illuminate. That's the group that met in Europe, in France in the 1930s that came up with all of this. This is all tied together. So again, D65 is what you want. Your target luminance here goes exactly back to the story about how you set the brightness on your monitor. So the black point of your monitor is controlled by the environment. The white point is controlled by the brightness of your monitor. And I can tell you right now, every single one of you has got your monitor brightness cranked up so high. That's another reason your prints are not turning out the way your monitor looks. Your monitor is so bright, you go in and you push your file down so that it looks good on a too bright monitor. But then when that file prints out, it prints out how dark you've actually made the file. The problem is that your monitor, it's not your file. So all the decisions that you're making, this isn't just decisions that you make about prints. How many of you shoot tethered in the studio? If you don't calibrate your monitor, you don't know what your brightness is, you're making judgments about your color and also about your tone, your exposure, and they're all wrong. If you want to do this on a professional scale, and I think you do, I think that's what you all are hoping for, right? You have got to leave all of this bad habit shit behind. And you've really got to strap your color down and just, okay, I'm going to control this. First thing I do in the morning, go in the studio, calibrate your monitor. I tell people this story all the time, and it's true. Pixar, you know, the Disney company that makes, you know, cartoons and, you know, Toy Story and all that kind of stuff, whatever. If you do not calibrate your monitor, they have a requirement. You have to calibrate your monitor every single morning. If you don't, that's grounds for dismissal. They fire you if you only did your monitor yesterday and not today. That's how important it is. For them, it matters. For them, if they end up with a problem that then ultimately gets rendered through some rendering farm for billions of dollars or and months of rendering, and something is off and it's your fault, they just don't tolerate it. They just don't tolerate it. Everything is like monitored, and again, so anyway, that's how important it is. How often do you have to do it? Well, you have to do it every single time color matters. You don't need to do this to watch porn. You don't need to do this to type letters. You don't need to do this for email. You don't need to do it for any of that stuff. But if you have color critical work, you have got to do it that morning. So again, a lot of the compositing work that we do, you'll be able to put stuff together. The color isn't really that issue. But when it gets to color correction, that is, and you have to color calibrate. That's the simple long and short of it. For me, I do it once every couple of weeks, but every single time color matters. Okay, so how bright is your illuminance? A lot of people will say a standard of 120 candelas per squared meter. That's what this number is right here. I like mine a little bit brighter. I set mine at 140. You can adjust this. Again, the sort of standard you'll get is about 120. But as long as your experience is telling you that the brightness that you're seeing on your screen is what you're getting in your prints, then you should be good to go. I would suggest to you to stay between 120 and 140 in this candela per squared meter part right here. Then in terms of the tone response curve, this thing right here, without getting too deep into digital and the issues that we have with digital, your computer screens are right out of the box extremely flat. They lack contrast because this is a linear system. Without getting too deep into that, you need a contrast correction, and that's what this gamma is right here. And the one you want is a 2.2. This is the one that's used universally. In the olden days, Macintosh used to use a different one than Windows, but everybody pretty much settled on this. So your gamma setting you want at a 2.2. At this stage of the game, there's this little check mark down here that says ambient light smart control. Adjust this profile based on the ambient light. And what that does is that it basically, if you turn it on, it'll use the camera that's in your computer to measure the available light, and then it will adjust your profile brightness based on the available light. It defeats the entire purpose. The entire purpose you're defeating here. We are trying to eliminate variables. This introduces one. Make sure that's turned off. However, before we go any further, I need everybody to do this with me that has a Macintosh. For the Windows people, there is an entire recipe about how to do this, turn the stuff off that you need to turn off. You don't have as many things as Macintosh does. But at any rate, I don't want to leave you out, but I just want to show you this process so that we can sort of move on. For those who are on Macintosh, up to the Apple menu, down to System Preferences. And inside System Preferences, the first thing that we want to do is come down here to Displays. And you'll see I end up getting two different things. This is for the projector up here. This is for my monitor right here. In this, if you actually come over to Color, you will actually see, that's not what I'm looking for, Displays, oh, right here. In the General Display part, this automatically adjusts brightness. Again, that's introducing a variable. You've got to make sure that this is unchecked, and it needs to be unchecked when you make your profile and also when you use your monitor. This is the same thing. Now imagine you've got two systems. You've got your profile that's trying to adjust for the brightness, but your system is trying to do it as well. You're just in for a world of hurt, and you will never have anything that you can use. So anyway, that remains unchecked. This True Tone also gets unchecked because it's actually saying, okay, we're going to change the color depending on the time of day. As we get later into the evening, we're going to actually warm your color up so it's easier on your eyes. That's exactly what your glasses are doing with the blue in there, unfortunately. I can't say that it's a serious problem to do serious color with tint in your glasses, but that's my guess is that it is. Okay, oh, we didn't talk about this. Environment. Hey, Maury, can you stand up for just a second and close up your beautiful, beautiful top? So, what do you wear when you retouch? Say what? Why? If Mari wears that at her screen, those colors are reflecting in her screen. That's adding oranges and that sort of like warmth part to her images that she then color corrects out because she thought that was, you know, she was looking at this orangish like color, whatever. It's not the monitor's problem. It's not the file's problem. It's what she's wearing. The color in your room. Thanks. So you were the only one who had color on. I said, you're the only one that had real color on, so not that I was picking on you, it was just like, okay, there's only one person that's got serious color. But the color of your room, all of that stuff matters because it all have an impact on what your screen is showing you. You got to neutralize it out. I wear gray and black. I have light covers to cover all of my windows that I can take off, you know, so it's just basically blackout material that you can either push pin up, or most windows like this stuff have a metal frame around them so you can use magnets to hold it in place. That's what I do. Anyway, you've got to eliminate all the variables in your room. Back to environment. Make sense? Okay, so this all gets turned off. You would think that would be enough. It's not. Then you need to go to accessibility. Inside of accessibility, there's also a whole nother thing of displays. This is the thing that drives me crazy. And you need to enable this reduced transparency. What Macintosh did, and they thought was really cool, is that they allow, if you've got a program that's open, they actually put in a sort of transparency so you can sort of see a little bit what's behind it, so you have some sense of what's going on behind it. But that causes us problems when we're actually trying to profile our monitors, because whatever program or desktop is open underneath the colors that it's going to be showing us and that we're going to measure show through. So you need to eliminate that part of it. And then lastly down here, nobody ever really touches this, but you do not want to touch this display contrast down here. You will make your computer pretty unusable. So once we get through all of that, I'm here now in this, and I'm just going to hit the next button. It walks you through this stuff pretty clearly. You'll see there's a thing right here. It's a little hard to see on my screen, but up at the top, oops, sorry, never mind, go back. There's a thing up here that says Start Measurements, and you'll actually see there's a screen here that's got a bunch of colors on it. So I'm going to go up here to the top, and I'm going to click Start Measurement. Again, you won't see it. I just saw my screen go incredibly blue. This will actually walk you through what you're supposed to do. This little puck has a protective cover on it. You pull this out, and then you can spin the cover around, and then you will reveal the lens that you need to use to actually do the measuring of this. And you'll notice that when you do it, the screen changes. It knows that you've done it. And it says, okay, for the best results, be sure the measuring device is flat. So I'm going to put this measuring device right in my screen. It's tilted back so that the device is really like laying against it, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then finally, the next button right here. So this is a 3-pass thing, and it's starting right now. Again, you'll see the colors that it's doing. The first pass is to actually calibrate your monitor. What it's trying to do is make your monitor D65 or 6500 degrees Kelvin. It's trying to remove any color cast in your monitor. But that's got nothing to do with how it responds to color. That doesn't have anything to do with the discrepancies that we've got. It's also establishing, well, you'll see here, it's establishing the brightness first. So in my screen right here, you can see that my target right here is 140. My measured illuminance value is 123. This is the most janky thing you're going to have to do with this. But again, you should write this down, because otherwise you're not going to, there's no other way you're going to be able to figure out how to do this. You need to go to your photo app and get it ready to take a picture of your screen. And then what you do is this. In Macintosh, you use the brightness controls. Sorry. And of course on mine, I don't have brightness controls. Hang on one second. And it's also now mirroring that, which I don't want. Oh, please. That's all good. That's all good. Start measurement. That's all good. Next. So this is now telling me the brightness of my screen. It's measuring it. And again, it's saying that I've got a range here of 122. So right now, I'm not getting my brightness controls on. Oh, there we go. So if I click to make my monitor a little bit brighter, you'll see that this just jumped. My measurement white luminance jumped to 169. Again, we're setting our white point now. This is too high, so I need to come back down to this. But you'll notice that there's just that little icon that's on the bottom here. I'm going to go back up again. This little icon right here that's just got those like little dental teeth at the bottom part of it all. Again, that's all we've really got to go on to see what range we really need to do. So I'm going to do mine at a 122 because it's closer than a 169. So I'm going to hold my phone. Actually, I'll do it on my screen up here because it'll be easier to do. And I'm going to go, right now it's too bright, so I'm going to go down one, which is the correct thing, and take a picture of it. Because now I can count up the number of little dental teeth that were along the bottom so I know how to set my brightness. Make sense? So then you can actually change your brightness when you're doing other work, when you're actually, okay, I want to do something else. But when it comes time to do the serious retouching, tonal and color correction, you reset your brightness to the value that you need for your profile. But again, who cares if you set your brightness up higher to type out, Word documents? Make sense? I know that this seems really janky. There's got to be a way but Apple does not make this a way that you can actually save that or hit a button that will reset it to that value. I mean, I've tried to find everything. Are we good on this? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it here and say okay and hit next. So now it's going to go through these steps, and it's again going to do this whole process. You'll see it's just kicking out colors. This is one of 118 colors. The software knows what this color is. The puck is measuring it on my computer, and whatever that discrepancy is, it's actually generating the profile to make that difference. Are we good on this part? Okay. You can stay here and watch this mesmerizing thing. I'm going to say it's 3:05 right now. If you could be back at 3:15, we will move on from this. Again, make it another hard 8, a hard 10, if you will. I know it doesn't seem like we're going to work on pictures today, but I promise you we are. it's gone through its process. It's reached this stage of the game. It says, okay, it's time to take the puck off and actually put the protective cover back on it again, which I'm going to do. So just take it off, twist the guy around, set it down. The software knows that that's actually what I've done. Then I'm going to hit the next button. It takes me to the next screen. And it says the measurement was completed successfully. You care about this because it's actually verified the profile. If it had screwed something, if something had gone awry, it would tell you this. So this is just a confirmation to say, yep, everything worked out fine. It's actually, you're ready to go to the next step. I'm going to say okay to that. And this is what I want you to take a look at. If you take a look at this screen right here, you'll see it's the same square, it's the color palette that we started out with. And you can see it's now been divided into two sections. Every single one of these squares is two sections. The upper left hand was the color that was asked for. The lower right hand was the color that my monitor showed it. Anybody see a problem? I mean, it's massive. It's massive. How on earth could you possibly do good color correction when it's asking for this color green right here and my monitor is giving me that? Darker and more saturated, not even the same color. And it's wholesale, it's everywhere. It's pretty good in the darker reds up in here. Those are actually pretty close. The greens are pretty far off. The blues are okay. The neutral tones are horrible. This has got some pink cast through all of it. I mean, it's a nightmare. This is what you're facing. And this is how you're trying to color correct. You're believing what your monitor shows you, but your monitor is lying to you, and it's not just a little white lie. It's this huge monster, big-ass lie. And you're doomed. There's no way. And that's why you end up doing the color correction that you do. You do a print. You say it looks too red. You suck some of the red out, and you do another print. And this just keeps going on because you're trying to deal with this. I just say eliminate it. And that's what this process does. So at any rate, I'm ready to do this part right now. In terms of again, it leaves you, just in case, you have one last chance to turn on that automatically display control part. This is actually not the same thing as the adjust brightness. This is for really high-end monitors. Unless you've spent $8,000 on your monitor, you're not going to check this box. You're just going to leave the adjust brightness gains manually done, so the profile will set the brightness of your computer actually correctly. So I'm simply going to hit next. And it offers to name this thing, and it gives it this really stupid generic name, Color LCD. You do not want to call it a Color LCD. However, you do want the date in here, so you'll see this is the, again, this is using, I don't know that this is the best naming convention for a date that I've ever seen. I actually prefer, but nonetheless, it is. So today's the 13th of September, 2022. However, I'm going to change the name, and I'm going to call this my MacBook Pro. And it's a 13-inch because I have another computer, underscore, and I put my initials in here. And that lets me know that I'm the one who made the profile, and it makes it easier to spot because profiles get dumped all together. Well, they can be dumped all together, whatever, and you can end up with hundreds, if not thousands of them, and it's just an easier way to find this. You can set a profile reminder to tell you should be doing this once a week or once every 2 weeks, whatever. I'm going to leave that off. Again, this is that ambient light monitoring. It's set to off, and it should stay at off because you don't want anything to change right now. And then you simply click on Save Profile. It says the profile was successfully saved, and I can simply say, okay, I'm done now. I can quit the iProfiler. There's a way that you can actually go through and see, compare befores and afters and all that kind of stuff. If you want to hear the instructions on how to do it, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to quit this. But I want to show you one last place to check this is to come up to your system preferences, come to your displays, and check the color of this monitor, and you'll see this profile is selected, and it's the one that I just made that's right here. So you are not going to be able to see this. Oh, I don't want to screw this up. So hang on, I'm going to need everybody. Can I get everybody to come up over here? So sort of just in this general area right in here. All you guys over there, come over to this side. I need you to be able to see my screen so I can show you before and after, but I can't change, I can't unplug anything that I don't, I'll lose everything if I start unplugging stuff. So come spread around. All you need to be able to do is see this screen. That's all I really care about. And it'll go really quick. All right, can everybody see this? Okay, so this is how Apple sends its computers. Again, don't look at that screen because nothing will change on that. That's got its own profile. It's through the projector. It's only on here. That's why I've got you all up here. So that's what Apple does. And this is calibrated. Apple. How blue could you get? Calibrated. Neutral. Apple. Neutral. Oh, it's night and day. That's why I show you this to you guys. You've had no chance up until now to be able to get your color right. Are we good on this? All right. So please, by next week, get your laptops calibrated. If you have stuff at home, if you've got a desktop at home or an iMac or anything like that at home, you can check these things out for like 2 or 3 days. Check one out and actually make sure that you get your stuff calibrated, because that's the first step in our color managed workflow. So really quickly, if we go back and take a look at where we're at right now in our flow, we've made this part right now. We just created this. Not only did we calibrate our monitor, that was one step, to neutralize it to a D65 so it doesn't have any color cast, but we also just built this monitor profile. So everything that's coming out of here is going to be color corrected so that this appears the way the standard observer would see it. Step number 1. Step number 2, you guys are going to do with me. And step number 2 is to actually create the sensor profile. So we're going to do that part next, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we are. Okay, so let me see what I can get out of here. I'm going to stay in that. I'll get there. Okay, so I need everybody to go to the assignments folder that everybody has downloaded. Everybody does have the full assignment folders, right? All the assignments. What computer do you have? Windows or Mac?
Mac.
Okay. Open that up. And it is that assignments complete fall 22. Drag that whole folder to your desktop. So this is all the assignments for the entire semester. Okay, and then you can eject my hard drive and you are good to go. Sure. Okay. So if you take a look in your class number 2, in your files, you will actually see there are 2 files in here. One is camera calibration setup, EXE. That's for Windows people. That's what you want to install. We're installing a program here that's going to allow you to do a lot of this color work. For the Macintosh people, it's the one right under it, the color checker camera calibration .pkg. Just double click, if you're on Windows, double click the EXE file. If you're on Macintosh, double click the PKG file. I'm going to go ahead and just I'm not going to, mine's already installed, but I'm going to go ahead and run the installer just so that you can sort of see what happens. And it's going to say, yeah, continue. We're going to do the whole thing, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we're going to continue. I'm not going to read the notes. I'm going to continue. Yes, you can have my firstborn child. Yes, you can, you know, all of that stuff. And then I would just click on install. But in my case, I've already got it installed, so I'm not going to do that. But I need you guys to go ahead and run that installer because we need to actually use that program. Everybody's good with getting this going, right? Are we all good?
Is this going to be on your YouTube channel?
Say what?
Is this going to be on your YouTube channel?
Yes. And can somebody give me an idea when it's finished working for you? It says less than a minute? Okay. All right. Oh, are you trying to do it on there? You know, the software itself might actually already be on there. Okay. Take a look at, yeah, because again, these computers are locked down. This is an image that I don't think they allow us to add anything. So just take a look really quickly at the application folder. And on the Mac, it'll be color checker. Do you see anything? Yep. Yep. So if you're working on one of the school computers, the software is already installed on that. At least on the Mac side it is. So how about the rest of you? Are we done? Are we good? Are we installed? Am I waiting for anyone? Okay, so also inside that same folder, you should see another folder that says DNG Custom Profile Example Files. And inside that, you might see, I'm not sure what you're going to see in there. There may be a CR2, there may be a DNG, and there may be a XMP file in there. Or you may just have the CR2 file. What do you guys have? Just the CR2? Okay, fine. I'm going to start just like you guys. I'm going to get rid of these. All right, I'm just going to double click on the CR2 file. Now, in this case, I've still got my color picker is open in Photoshop, so I'm going to hit cancel. Did anybody did anybody go into like something weird like Capture One or Preview or Lightroom, or did that happen to anyone? Well, I want to show you guys a quick trick. So look at my screen really quickly here. If you're files that you've got that are, if they're opening in a program that you don't expect them to open up, I expect my CR2s to open up in Photoshop. If you click on Photoshop and do Command I, which is Get Info, it's also right under the File menu that says just Get Info. It'll open up, and down here at the bottom, it will say, it'll give you, this is where you assign the program that's actually going to open this file. If you click on the drop-down menu, you'll see that all of these different things can actually open that CR2 file, but I've got it set to open in Photoshop. And then instead of having to change every single one of your files that's on your machine doing this two-step program, simply click on Change All, and it will change every single CR2 raw file that you've got to open up in Photoshop when you actually click on it. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop. This is our first jump into Camera Raw right here. And you'll see that there's a color card that's in here. This is a color checker. This is one that I use right here. This guy will do two things for you. Oh, actually, it'll do three things for you. The first thing it'll do for you is actually give you perfect exposure. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. The second thing that this thing will do for you is it will actually color white balance your images. And the third thing that it'll do is it'll actually give you a way to generate the sensor profile that we need to eliminate the bias of our camera sensors and our lighting situation. Does that make sense? So I use this to generate a custom sensor profile for every lighting situation that I go into. So if I'm in the studio and I set up lights and I'm shooting there for an entire week, I only build one of these. I build one in the very beginning of the shoot and I use it for the entire week. But if during that shoot I decide I'm going to pull out all the strobes or I'm going to change them, oh, fuck this, I'm not going Speedotron anymore, I'm going full Pro Photo, that's a change, a significant enough change that I would generate a new sensor profile for this. So what we're doing is that we are trying to adjust for the bias of the sensor, but that's impacted by light. So a sodium vapor light shot in the middle of the night is going to have a different impact on your sensor than a strobe that you shoot in the middle of the day in the studio. So it's that combination. We'll do the same thing when we get to printing. It's not only a matter of the inks that you're using, it's also the paper that you're using. So that's how I generate these for every single shoot that I actually do, and we're going to generate one for this right now and see how well it works. So our first thing that we have to do is, this software only works on DNGs, so we need to create a DNG. To do that, does anybody have an older version of Camera Raw that doesn't look like this? Does anybody have the version of Camera Raw where all the tools are still up on the very top? Okay, good. I only have to do this once. So to generate a DNG, if you look at my screen here really quick, on the top right-hand corner, there's a box with an arrow pointing down. If you click on that box, it will open up save options for you. And if you haven't done this before, it's already set up to do exactly what we want to do. We want to save this DNG in the same location as the CR2 file. So by default, it's going to set it in the same location. If you were going to do thousands of these and you wanted to save it someplace else, this would be where you could actually do it, but we're not going to change this. I'm going to leave it exactly the document name identical. It's just that the extension is going to be DNG instead of CR2. I am going to leave it as lowercase DNG. It is going to be a digital negative. That's the file format that we're doing. And I don't really care about the compatibility or the JPEG size because I'm not really using this file other than to generate this profile. So I'm simply going to hit save. There's a little bar that goes on the lower left-hand part of your screen that'll show you the progress. So if you're doing, you can do 100 of these at a time if you wanted to. It'll show you the progress. We've done everything that we want to do right now, so I'm simply going to hit the Done button and go back and look at my CR2 file. And if you look back at your CR2 file, this is actually giving me an XMP file, but it didn't give me the DNG, so let's try that again. Did you guys get a DNG? Oh, yeah, this is actually going someplace else. Sorry. Save in same location. And hit save. And then done. And here's my DNG right here. So we need to launch the software that you just installed on your computer. So application folder, there's two different names, and I don't know why they do this, but there are two different names. For Macintosh, it's the Color Checker Camera Calibration app. And for the Windows people, hang on one second. For the Windows people, it's just called Camera Calibration, I think. Do you have an app in there called Camera Calibration? Is anybody here on Windows? Did you, what's the program called? Oh, so it's got the same name. Okay, so it's, again, it's the same name for both of them, Color Checker, Camera Calibration. So is everybody able to launch this software? Sometimes you'll run into a problem with this. On Macintosh, it won't want to launch. If that happens, come up to your Apple menu, down to System Preferences. Inside of System Preferences, under Security and Privacy, click on that. Come over to Privacy. In the privacy part, first you have to unlock this security panel. So click on your lock and put in, do your finger touch thing or put in your password. Once that's done, you need to make sure that this color camera calibration is, it's not location services, it's going to be maybe in accessibility. Has anybody had a problem with this yet, with it launching? Did you get a warning? It said like, we can't run this, or you need special permissions. You'll get to that when we do the Wacom tablet, and it's this part right here. So in our case, it looks like this is okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue with this. So the DNG file that you just made, hang on one second. You need to drag that DNG file. Oh, so I'm going to go, this is the software that's now loaded, and you'll see it's talking about calibration. Have you calibrated your stuff? It's just a reminder that you need to be doing this. You can simply say OK to that. Then you need to drag that DNG on top of this screen. So I'm simply going to go to that DNG file, click and drag it on top of that screen. If you don't have, if drag and drop is not working for you, come up to your file menu and simply come down to add image and navigate to that DNG. And it should find the color target for you, and it should put this grid of little green squares on your color target. Did that work for everyone? If for some reason it doesn't work, there are controls that sit over here on the right-hand side that'll allow you to move things around, to zoom in and do sorts of stuff. The very top of the controls is an arrow with a little plus on it. If you come in and actually click on one of the green circle corners, you can actually move this grid around, although mine's in perfect alignment, so I don't want to do that part. But if you needed to tweak it a little bit, that's how you actually tweak it. But in our case, we're good to go here. Before we generate this profile, though, it's going to actually want to give it a really generic name, and you need to name your profiles based on the shooting that you're actually doing. So I want you to go back to the file that's in your Finder or on your desktop, whatever it is. If you're on a Macintosh, if you click on the file once and hit the return key, it will select just the name without the extension, and then do a copy of this. The shortcut for copy in Macintosh is Command-C, or come up to the Edit menu and come down and just do copy. That will copy the file name. Then go back into your calibration, the color checker calibration software. You want to make sure at the top, you have three different options right here. We can do a DNG profile, we can do a dual illuminate DNG, or an ICC profile. If you do a lot of work in Capture One, you will actually eventually start using this ICC profiles, because that's what Capture One uses. DNG only works in, the DNG profiles only work in Lightroom and in Camera Raw. We're not going to do a dual illuminate because, again, I've been talking you out of that. A dual illuminate would mean that you did a tungsten balanced profile target and a daylight balanced one, and you wanted to put the two together to sort of get an average profile. I'm trying to get you away from doing that kind of work. I want this to be specific to the lighting that you're going to do, and then if you're changing your lighting, you do another profile for that. So anyway, just make sure the DNG is the one that's picked at the very top, and then click on Create Profile. It's going to offer to name this thing, and again, it knows that I shot this with a Canon 5D Mark II, but again, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that it's designed for this particular shooting. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to change the name of this. So I'm going to click on it. I want to keep that .dcp, but I can get rid of the Canon part. And so I just hit the backspace, and then I'm going to hit Command-V to actually paste it in. And it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because the people who wrote this software are lazy. So instead, if you hold down if you've got a 2-button mouse, you can use the right button. If you don't, if you have a trackpad, you can do a 2-finger swipe to get a drop-down menu. For me, I always just hold down the Control key and click, and I will get a drop-down, click. Oh, please. DCP, hang on. Hold down the Control key, you'll get a drop-down menu that allows you, hang on one second. I'm just going to do this again. Get rid of the name. hold down the control key, click, I'll get a drop-down menu with paste available to me, and I can paste in the name. Now this name has also given me a 001, that's the frame number. I'm going to get rid of that, I don't need that. And I'm going to not change mine. I mean, you're only going to have one of these. I've got like 1,000 of these, so I'm going to put in number 63 just so I can remember it from the other 62 of these that I've made. This is important. I'm going to click on this drop-down menu, and you will see where these things are being saved. When you look, you're going to make these for your assignment for next week. You're going to make 4 of these. You need to get these profiles and turn them in. There is, if you look in the instructions for the assignment, it will tell you exactly where they are located in Macintosh and exactly where they're located in Windows. If you want to, really quickly, you can take a just take a photograph of this screen, because this is where they are. This is in my Macintosh HD inside of my user folder, inside of the library, in application support, in Adobe Camera Raw, into camera profiles. That's where it's going, and that's where you need to get it out of. Again, all of that information is in the assignment. You'll just be able to follow it for either Windows or Mac. But, so that's where it's going to go. So I'm going to save this profile now to that. It usually doesn't take anywhere near this long. But it says the profile has been created successfully. Applications for this will have to be restarted before the profile can be used. So I'm going to say OK to that. You can now quit this program. So I'm going to quit the color camera checker. To find this thing on a Macintosh, you need to get to the user library. By default, Apple hides that. So to get to the user library, I need everybody who's on a Mac to go to the Finder. In the Finder, there's a Go menu. This is the menu that we use to actually get to our server. If you click on the Go drop-down, you will notice there's no user library listed in this. Depending on your Macintosh, you add either the Shift key, in my case it's not the Shift key, or the Option key, and a library will show up. So again, the Go menu, either Shift or Option, you will see the library. This is the user library. Click on that. Once you're in the library, you can click on Application Support, Adobe, Adobe Camera Raw, Camera Profiles, and the profile that we just built is right here. This is the one that I just built, this 20, anyway, while I'm in here, I'm going to get rid of other copies of mine. You won't have these other copies in yours. But I'm going to get rid of, yeah, those guys right there. So this is actually my profile. We'll be good to go. At this stage of the game, you need to restart Photoshop. So simply quit it and then restart it again. And then I'm going to go find that CR2 file again, the one that's in your assignment folders. So again, under assignment week number 2, in the DNG custom profiles example, the CR2 is what we want to click on. However, there's a trick now. We've built this DNG, and what I really want to do is I want to have a DNG with this profile embedded in it to work with later on. I can't do that with the DNG that's already right here. So this DNG that's right here, you need to get rid of it. We're going to build another one with that profile embedded in it. So I'm just going to get rid of the DNG. The CR2 is still there. I'm going to double click on the CR2. It should open up into Camera Raw again. And this is how we ultimately use it. If you look at your basic panel that's over on the side, we sort of start up at the very top with editing and exposure, but right underneath it is profile. This used to be buried really deeply. They have made this so important now that it's the first step that you hit. So you actually want to assign this profile to this image before you actually do your white balance, your exposure controls, your sharpening, and all that kind of stuff. This thing comes first. So to get to it, you can have, there's a drop-down menu here under Profile, and you'll see that there's a bunch of different profiles that sit down here. I don't really like this drop-down menu part. I don't use it a lot. Instead, what I do is right next to it, there's an icon that looks like 4 little squares with a magnifying glass on it. If you click on that, this will open up the profile browser for you. And you can see that there's stuff up here at the very top. There's color, neutral, portrait. These are all canned profiles that Adobe has supplied. They're, in my opinion, just as effective as filters in Instagram. That's basically all they're doing here. I don't use any of this shit. And if you decide that you want to go down that road, you're on your own. But at any rate, for me, to get to the thing that we just made, it's you'll see down here underneath the standard version, there's a drop down that says Profiles. If you click on that, it will actually open up, and the profile that we created will be sitting right there. Now, I don't want you to actually select it. All you need to do is hover your cursor over it and just take it over and back and forth and back and forth. And you should see a massive shift in the sweater of this image. This is the correction. When I hover over this, this is what that sweater should look like. When I'm not hovering over it, this is the way Adobe thinks it should look. This is as bad as the calibration of the monitor part. And can you tell me what's wrong with this, what the difference is? If you zoom in on the card itself, you can see a little bit easier. Again, I'm not going to select the profile because once you select it, well, eventually we will select it, but I want to do this before and after so you can really see what's going on. But if you hover over it and then come away from it, look what it's doing, especially to the blue patch and to the sort of the sort of like pale cyanic like patch, whatever. You can see that those guys are radically changing. They're becoming darker. What that tells me is that my sensor is too sensitive to blue light. It thinks there's more blue than there really is. So this actually corrects for that. But how would you know that? There's no way. So I want you to click now on that profile. You'll actually see that up here at the very top, it puts it into the profile slot, the name of it. To get out of this browser, right underneath the histogram, there's a back arrow. Simply click on the back arrow, and this will get you back to exactly where we need to be. The last thing that I'm going to do on this is so now this is, the profile is corrected for the sensor, but it has not color balanced this image. We still need to white balance the image. So to do that, you click on the little eyedropper that's right next to white balance, and you come over, and what I do, the way white balancing works, and you'll see if you hover over, I'm going to hover over the gray patch that's right next to the red, and look up at your histogram. You'll actually get values up in your histogram, and you can see I've got an RGB readout in my histogram. That's why this doesn't work as well, or it's not as intuitive in Lightroom as it is here, because in Lightroom you do not get RGB readouts. But anyway, I've got an RGB readout that says an R of 194, a green of 197, and a blue of 197. That is not a neutral gray. Again, what I said to you in our lecture earlier, neutral gray by definition is equal amounts of RGB. So if you then click on that little gray patch, you will now notice that you've got a 196, 197, 197. Photoshop is struggling getting at it a little bit. You can actually use your white balance and click and drag across an area of that gray, and then you'll actually get all the way across 197s. Now, which of these gray patches do you use? You don't want to use the lightest two. Again, the reason you don't want to use the lightest two is you're not really leaving room to do color correction. The curve that you're trying to modify, it would be mostly way up by the highlights, which really makes it difficult to get a good shaped curve to control. So I'm going for something that's a little closer to mid-tone. However, Color casting always happens up in your quarter tones and highlights. You don't see it really in your shadows. So you don't want to use the shadow areas down here either. So for me, it's always this one that's right next to the yellow. That's just the one that I use, and it has never failed me. At this stage of the game, this image has got a custom profile. It's also been color corrected, and you want to create a DNG of this now. So click on that little drop down arrow. Again, we're going to save it in the same place. It's going to create this DNG, and I'm going to simply hit done. So we're going to go look at this right now. The reason that we threw away that first DNG is this. This DNG has actually got the profile embedded in it. And what I mean by that is that you created this profile on your computer. You saved that custom profile on your computer. But what happens when you take an image that you've been working on to another computer and start to work on that? That profile is not with it. And you will actually get a warning triangle that comes up when you open. So if I was to take this DNG and put it just on this computer right here that did not have the profile on it and open it up, it would give you a warning triangle right next to where it says that profile. It knows the name, it knows what's missing, but it says this is the profile that you did this on, and it's missing, it's not here. So I want to build a DNG that's got it embedded in it so that any place that I then take it, it will actually have the profile inside the master image that I'm working on. Yes?
You said you can export like multiple DNGs, but can you do white balance and profiles on multiple at once? Like if you were to do the white balance, how would you copy all of it?
You could do them all at once. Again, it gets tricky because opening up, especially if they're coming from radically different places on your computer, it's hard to select, unless they're all in one folder. It's very difficult to select, say, an image from folder 10 and an image from folder 98 and get them to open up at the same time. But there would be no reason that you couldn't, again, if they all had the same profile, that would be one thing. Doing them, ganging up all at once, I think for any amount of time, it would take you more time than you're going to save. That would just be my opinion. But this profile now will work. So I spent a day shooting in this light in the woods. This one profile will work for every single file that comes from that shooting. I don't have to build another one. Make sense?
Even if the lighting,
no, if the lighting changes, let's say it got overcast and I brought out a strobe, completely different lighting, a new profile. Are there questions about this part? So to show you what I mean by all of this, double click on the DNG. It will actually open up and you'll see that the profile is right here. I am actually going to, how can I do this? Don't do this, just watch my screen. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by this. So I'm going to open up the CR2, the original CR2, and I'm going to just do the same thing. I'm going to assign that profile to it. So the profile is assigned to it. Again, I'm going to do the color balance. And I'm just going to hit done. I'm not creating a DNG. It's just the CR2 file. The CR2 file writes this XMP file down here. That's what's remembering that profile and the color balancing. And if I open it up again, you see that the profile's there. No harm, no foul. I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm going to go find that profile. So again, for me, it's in my library, inside of application support, inside of Adobe, inside Camera Raw, inside Camera Profiles, and I'm going to grab this profile and I'm going to throw it away. So that profile is now gone. I'm going to go back into my files, and I'm going to open the CR2 again. And you see, here's this warning right here, and it's telling me that this profile is not installed and the rendering on this is going to be incorrect. But if I cancel out of this, even though I threw that guy away, the DNG has a copy of it embedded. So now I'm going to double click on the DNG, I come in, and it's sitting right here. So, I know at this stage of the game, people are thinking, oh my God, you're killing me here. I want you to think about that in a slightly different way. What I'm doing now is separating you from all your loser classmates. And when you leave Columbia and all of you guys are fighting for the same job, guess who's coming out on top? Because they don't know this shit. Imagine walking into a studio and saying to the photographer as a digital tech, you go in, hey, would you like me to profile your cameras for you? What? Well, because photographers are stupid as shit. They know the least. Sorry, it's true. But I'm serious. Would you like me to actually, you know, and why don't I calibrate your monitor while we're at it? You can't imagine how much of a change that might make. You start doing that kind of shit and people are all of a sudden eyeballing their first assistant going, well, they never did that for me. And all of a sudden you're like, you're rising up to the top. And it's like, I want them back. I want them back tomorrow. And your name goes to the top of the digital tech assistant list, whatever. And you work and you become famous and you become an incredible photographer because you survived. You didn't have to go back to fucking Starbucks and work there. And you're going to remember me and the fact that I helped make that all possible. And then you are going to come find me in the home that I'm hopefully still going to be alive in when that happens. And you're going to bring me either salt or bourbon or both. Because by the time I'm there, that'll really be the only thing that I still care about in life.
What kind of bourbon do you like?
Good bourbon. But at that stage of the game, beggars can't be choosers. But okay, so just charting the path. That's all I'm saying. Are there questions about this? Okay. So you can cancel out of this. What we've done here is actually fine. I'm going to go back to our little diagram really quickly. I think we're doing pretty good, guys. I hope. I always get panicked here, my timing, but I'm usually pretty good. So we have now built the second part of this. We've now got our camera profiles. So we are bringing into Camera Raw unambiguous, device-independent color. That comes into our working space. It doesn't get changed here at all. This working space is the same on every computer that's running Photoshop in the world. So if I send somebody this file and it has that profile embedded into it, when they bring it in here, it will be identical. No change will be made. If then they have got a calibrated monitor with their profile and you have a calibrated monitor with your profile, your monitor and their monitor will look identical. And then the same thing happens just going out to printing. It's just another version of this same thing. Make sense? We will look at printing later because you guys you don't have to print anything in this class until the end. Okay, are there any questions about this so far? Okay, I told you perfect exposure. We need to look at this really quickly. Can I get everybody to come back here? Again, you won't see this on the video, but I need everybody to crowd back here. So, oh wait. So this is a synthetic file that I built, and there was nothing photographed in here. And basically what it is that there's squares of density of black that start here. So this first square right here, you can't even see it because it's too close to the one next to it. But you can sort of get an idea of what these little squares look like. They hold these V's. They're about like a postage stamp size. This first one is the background is 000. That's a pure black. The next one is 333. That's not a pure black, but close. 666, 999. So again, all my RGB values are identical all the way up here, and this gets up to 21, 21, 21. Then in this group right in here, it starts at 24 and it goes all the way up to 45. So the V's that are on here are jet black on all of them. So what we need to do, and this is something that you guys need to do, one thing that you cannot do in a profile is you cannot really set where your target for shadow and highlight detail is in a profile. That's something you need to know and you need to set yourself. And the only way to do it is to actually kick out a file like this and figure out where is my shadow detail. So what we mean, and highlight detail, what we mean by shadow detail is where does the V become really visible? Not just barely visible. So don't go saying, well, yeah, if I hold a flashlight really close to this thing, I can see something in that. That's not shadow detail. Shadow detail is apparent detail when you look at a print and you just say, oh, yes, that's got great detail in it. So I need you guys to look at the numbers on this and tell me, where do you really see the V? Point to it. Anywhere. All right, so I got a 30. What about the rest of you guys? Further up, further down? So the one before 30 is 27. So around 27, so it'd be 27, 27, something like that. You guys kind of agree with that? That's actually my target. My target really falls somewhere around 25, 26, 27 for shadow detail, not my blacks. Blacks should be darker than this, but my shadow detail. Flip side, we're going to do the highlights here. Where do you see the highlights? Where is the white V really, really, really visible? Again, in my scale up here, this is 234, 234, 234. This is all the way up. This is 255, 255, 255, which is white. This is 252, so anyway, where? Say?
Like 252.
We got a 252. What about the rest of you guys? 249. Yeah, I'm feeling 252. I can see it, but it's barely, right? I mean, it's really in here. That 249-ish range in there. Okay, back this way. Oh, actually, I'm going to forget this, so I'm going to take this with. So if you could open that file up again for me, the one that we've been dealing with, the girl holding the color card. I'm going to open up the D&G version of it. And I'm going to zoom in to the color card. Again, it will have remembered it's not only the profiles on it, but also it's been white balanced. I want you to just hover over the white patch that's on here. And you can take a look up at the screen, and the screen says 246, 246, 244. Now again, we've color balanced the sort of midtones in here. If there's a little bit of drift at the top, that doesn't really bother me all of that much, whatever. But if you look at this color card right here, this is a real thing. This white patch on here is a real thing. It should have some detail to it. I'm photographing it. This should not be page white. This should not be 255. It's a real thing. Where did we just establish highlight detail should be? 249? It's really hard to hit a perfect 249. So my target is always 245 to 250. That range in there will bring this up very close to page white, but still leave texture in here because it's real. This should not be page white. If you take this to 255, you've overexposed your file. If you take this to 245 to 250, you've got perfect exposure. So now I have perfect exposure. Do not change this in based on, so do not like shoot your card, and if you're in Capture One or in Lightroom, all of a sudden make a software adjustment to boost the exposure up. That would not be correct. You need to fix this in either amp your lighting up or open up your camera to actually, control your camera. This is about exposure, not about software. Software is a crutch. Does that make sense? And now you know why this is 245 to 250, because you guys just picked it out. Yes?
What was the shadow detail numbers again?
245 to 250. Okay, so now I've got a sensor profile that has been built. I have got perfect exposure, and I got white balance, and it cost me $79. If you're thinking about getting one of these, there's educational discounts. Don't just, and I'm not here, I don't sell software, I don't sell these things, I don't sell any of that kind of shit. But I'm just telling you, this thing, I haven't shot with one of these things since 2004. I've not done any pictures in my life without one of these. There's just no reason. Are we good? Okay. Smart objects, who can tell me what they are? Anyone? Huh.
Wait, no, I'm thinking of
You're thinking of something completely different, but that's okay. It's been a long day, I know. But we're getting into the meat of it. We're actually going to work on a file here, so please, if you can, get on a computer to actually do this with. Smart objects. We use them to death in this class. But I need you guys to understand what they are, why we're using them, how we're using them. So I'm going to try to talk about this in the way that I think makes it the easiest to understand. So the way to think about a smart object is that you need to think of it like it's an envelope, like it's a container. So what I'm going to do is, here's my image, and I'm going to turn this into a smart object. And what I'm really doing with this is I'm putting it inside this protective container. Once it's in here, I cannot fuck it up. I can do a lot of things to the container to give the illusion that I'm changing the smart object, but I can't do really anything to the smart object itself unless I take it out of this guy. Then I can fuck it up. Make sense? So we're gonna, yeah, so I need to show you this whole process so that you understand where this is going to go, because this is going to change how you process files probably for the whole rest of your life. I'm going to get rid of this girl right now, and I'm going to go back into your session 2 files, and let's see if I've got something in here. We're just going to make a synthetic file. So jump. Oh, I know. Wait, I know what we can do. I know what we can do. I know what we can do. Yep. No. Let's just jump into Photoshop really quick. I'm going to make a brand new file. Command N. I'm creating just a synthetic file for me. I'm going to use my drop down here to make just an 8x10 image. So it's going to be 10 inches wide. Tab key will get me to the height, 8 inches tall. Tab key will get me to the resolution. I'm put in 300 and simply say OK. And it's just creating a file for me. If you don't have the exact 8x10, don't worry about it. That part doesn't really matter. That's not what this is really all about. I'm then going to come over and I am going to, how do I want to do this? How do I want to do this? Oh, wait a second. Wait a second. I may have a better call here. I do. We're going to work on a different file here, guys. So you can close up that thing you just made. And shoot. All right. When in doubt, I need everybody to go back to our files from number 1 and grab the red car. So student files number 1, assignment files number 1, go into that folder. There's a redcar.psd. Open that guy up. We're going to work with him instead. All right, does everybody get this guy open? OK, I need to actually be able to scale this in size. So I am going to actually start by creating a copy of this and just a solid color layer underneath. The easiest way to duplicate a file is just hit Command J. Command J, you can think of it as jump. So just hit Command J. Again, every time I say Command for the Macintosh, in my Macintosh world, for Windows people, it's Control. So again, just Control J. And you can see that it makes a copy of the entire thing. I want you to go back down to the original file that's underneath it and hit the D key. If you hit the D key, it doesn't change anything on your layers, but it defaults your foreground and background colors to black and white. So if you want to flip them, if you take a look on your toolbar down at the very bottom, you'll see right above the foreground and background, this area that I'm pointing to right here, you'll see that there's a double-headed arrow, sort of like an L-shaped thing with an inverted L with a double-headed arrow. If you click on that, it actually just flips your colors back and forth. So it makes the background color the foreground color the background color. The X key does the same thing, and it's just easier to hit. So X will take you back and forth. I'm going to leave white as my foreground color. I don't use tons of keyboard shortcuts, but the ones that I use, you guys want to know. So this is one of them. I've got my background layer is selected. You can tell it's selected because the layer itself is a lighter gray. It's highlighted, but there's also brackets that are going around the image part of it. The bracket part tells you what you're really working on. So if we were to add a layer mask to this, and we wanted to work on the mask, we would want those little brackets on the mask. If we wanted to work back on the image, the brackets would be on the image, blah, 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 blah. So I'm on that bottom layer. I got the brackets around there. To fill this with the foreground color, the keyboard shortcut is Option Delete on a Mac. That is Option Backspace on a Windows machine. And you'll notice it just filled that with white. To fill it with a background color, it is Command Delete, or again, Command Backspace in Windows, Control Backspace Windows. And you can see it just filled it with black. Those two keys, if you look at the option in the command or the option in the control, they sit right next to your space bar. The relationship is the same. The command and the control key it's the one that's furthest to the right. And it always represents the background color because the background is the icon that's furthest to the right. The option key, which is to the left of it, is always your foreground color because it's also to the left of it in the toolbar. Does that make sense? So if you, hang on one second to that thought, click on the foreground color and let's make it just a pure red. So I'm going to get rid of, I'm going to put in 0 green and 0 blue. That gives me a pure red. Now red is my foreground color. Option Delete fills the background with red because it's only filling foreground color. It doesn't know what that color is. Make sense? You had a question? Yes. Yeah. If again I want to go back to my defaults, black and white, you simply hit the D key and it goes back to the default. So I'm going to go back to the default. I am going to fill it with white. White is my background color, so Command or Control, Delete and or Backspace. It's now white. I'm going to now come up to my car, and I've selected the car layer, and I'm going to transform this. I'm going to shrink the car. So I'm going to hit Command T. That brings up the transform dialog box. If you can't remember that, come up to the Edit menu, down to Transform, and we are going to scale this. So again, Edit down to Transform, but you'll notice the keyboard shortcut for it's right here. We transform a lot of stuff in this class, so it's just an easier way to actually work with it. For me, I always transform, not always, but usually 99.9% of the time, transform and maintain the ratios of my image. To do that, if you look up at the top, the minute we hit Command T, the options bar at the top will change depending on the tool that you're using or the instruction or the drop-down menu, whatever it is you're doing. This thing up at the top will always change. You always need to look up here to see what's going on to make sure. This is where we control our brushes. This is where we control everything. So again, your eyes should go up to here immediately. You will notice that there is there's an X and a Y. That's just the position of the cursor in here. We're coming over here to the W and the H. That stands for width and height. And you'll see that in between the two, there's a little icon. It's supposed to look like a chain link. If you click on that chain link, it locks those two together so that when you change one, the other changes proportionately. And then there's a number of ways to change the scale of this. You can actually swipe across in this case, the width. You can do either the width or the height. It doesn't matter which one because they are locked together. You can swipe across that and you can type in a value. You can actually hover your cursor over the W or the H and you get what's called the scrubby slider. If you click on that and start to drag in one direction, it'll make things smaller. If you drag in the opposite direction, it'll make things larger. I use the scrubby slider all the time, and I'm going to actually ask you to drop this all the way down to 5%. And you'll notice they're both at 5%. You'll notice I've still got my handles. I'm making it very small. I've still got my control handles around here. To affect this transform, hit the Enter key or the Return key on your Mac once. You'll notice we've still got the handles because all that Enter key did was accept the 5% in the width part. Hit it a second time to actually do the transform. So now I've got a really little bitty car. Did this work for everyone? So here, I'll show you again really quickly. I'm just going to undo. Command-T to transform. Click on the lock between width and height. Hover over the W with your cursor. The lock in between width and height. Hover over either the W or the H. Click and drag to the left until it goes all the way down to 5%, or type in 5%, one or the other. Hit your Enter key once. A lot of times you have to hit the Enter key to accept the 5% in the dialog box, and then a second time to go ahead and do the transform. So everybody should have a really little car, right? Okay, I don't want to undo this. What I want to do is retransform this back to its original. Command-T again. Again, click on the lock between the width and the height. And now you'll see that we've still got the 100% in there. I want you to then, we're going to actually type in this value. So I'm going to type, I've just selected the 100% for the width, and I'm going to type in 2000, 2000. Again, it's the value's in here, but it hasn't been entered. You can see the box is still highlighted. Hit your Enter key once, and that will actually enter that value, and hit it a second time, and that will do the transform. We call that destructive transforming. Look at your car. Pretty bad, right? Like unusable bad, right? So in your history palette over on the left-hand side, I need you to come back 2 steps from the bottom. You need to go back to the last of the fill layers right before the free transforms so that we get back to the original car. But now I'm going to do something different. I'm going to select the car, but before I transform it, I'm going to come up to the Layer menu, down to Smart Objects, and Convert to Smart Object. So look up at my screen here really quickly. Make sure that the car is selected, not the background underneath it. The car is selected, up to the Layer menu, down to Smart Objects, and Convert to Smart Object. And you'll notice when you do that, if you made your little previews in your layers palette big like I suggested, and you look at the lower right-hand corner, you'll see this weird little icon. That weird little icon is an indication that this is a smart object. I have just taken the car and put it inside this envelope. It is now protected. We're going to do our transform again. Same thing. Command-T. Click on the link between width and height. Take your scrubby slider, drop it down to 5%. Hit the Enter key once or twice. We've got a really small little car. Do not hit Command-Z to undo. That defeats the whole purpose of this exercise. We are going to retransform the car. Command-T. Look what happened. Instead of reverting back to 100%, it remembers that you reduced this down to 5%. Click on the link between the width and the height. Drag across either one of them and type in 100 to get back to 100%. Hit the Enter key once to accept the value, Enter key again to do the transform. And the car is not destroyed. Non-destructive transforms. Makes sense to everyone? Hit the B key really quick to get a brush and hover over your car. You cannot paint on a smart object. Hit the S key to get the clone stamp tool. You'll still get that little circle with the slash through it telling you you cannot clone on a smart object. It is protected. Now for something really wild. Come up to the Filter menu, come down to Blur, down to Gaussian Blur, and we're really going to whack this. Let's put, 114. I'm going to, here, just put in a value. Do 100. 100 pixels for your blur. Pretty much obliterates the car. Again, the smart object is protected. Look what you have. You actually have a smart filter now. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. I got back.
All right, so you're back.
Sure.
It's not a smart object though. You went too far back, so come up to Layer,
Okay.
down to Smart Object. Yep, over to Convert.
All right.
Perfect. And now run Filter,
Filter.
Blur, Gaussian blur, and type in 100, and say OK. So look what I have down here at the bottom. It's actually a smart filter. Again, this is an illusion that's been created. The smart object is protected. You can actually turn the eyeball of the Gaussian blur off, and the car is right there. It's not blurred at all. Even better, turn the Gaussian blur on. You've got a mask. That layer, that filter mask is sitting right there. Take a brush, the B key. Make sure that, in this case, I'm going to leave my brush at a 50% hardness. Make sure it's a normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. To make your brush larger or smaller, I typically use the bracket keys just to the right of the P key. The key immediately, the open bracket key that's right next to the P key to the right side actually makes your brush smaller. The closed bracket that's just to the right of that makes it bigger, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Hit the X key, in my case, to make sure that black is my foreground color. So black is my foreground color. Make sure that the little brackets are around the smart filter mask, and then simply paint the mask, the blur out. Oh, yeah. That's all right. All right, so we got a blurred car. Make sure that you're selecting the mask of the smart filter. Hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure that your foreground color is black. If it's white right now, hit the X key and it will make it black. It just trades them. And then simply paint on the layer mask. Again, we are hiding the blur. Oh, it gets better. You can actually hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to hit the G key to get a gradient. In the gradient drop down, again, I change mine a lot, but I've got a pretty good, there's a gradient here going from black to white, and I'm simply going to drag across from left to right, and I can actually have a gradient blur. Oh yeah, it's insane. So if I can throw this away, throw the smart filter away, throw the smart filter away, not just the layer mask. We go back to this. If you double click on the car, you will actually notice, again, if you've got yours set up the way I do to not do tabbed behavior, you get a second copy of this car. The second copy of this car is actually what I've done now is I went into the smart object and I just pulled this out. This was what was in the smart object being protected. It's now pulled out and it's not protected anymore. And you can tell the difference. You can see that this is a .psb file as opposed to a in this case, a PSD file. This is now this thing been pulled out. I'm going to invert this. So hit Command I. It'll just invert the image. I just need to make a change. And close it up. So hit close and save it. And now you'll see that I pulled this image out. I inverted it. And then I put it right back in here. It's now protected, but the image is inverted. Yes? Say what? Oh, just throw it away.
Right.
Oh, hit Command Z to undo that. Just drag that to the trash.
Oh, okay.
And then drag the smart filter to it as well. And you're good. Yeah, just drag it to the trash. Done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's okay.
I think I.
Okay.
Yeah. So how do
So
I?
it is a smart object, which is great. Double click on the smart object. That's now out of this. And so now hit Command I to invert it. And then hit close it up. And it's going to say, do you want to save that? And say yes. What you just did is you pulled the image out of the smart object, changed it, and then put it right back in.
Wait. Explain that one more time.
OK. And I'm going to show you here because I'm going to show everybody. So this is what we did. I should really have a picture of a car. Instead, I got a picture of this woman. It's actually scantily clad women on both sides, but whatever. So my first move was to create, I had this file, the car, and I wanted to protect it, a smart object. So I put it inside the smart object envelope. And then we did all our transforms and all that kind of stuff, but the whole time the image was in here. It was fine, it was protected. But then I double-clicked on the smart object, which actually removed this. It pulled it out. This is now the car sitting out. I inverted this, and then when I went to close it, the inverted copy, and said, yes, save that, it put the inverted copy back into the smart object, and it's still protected right now. I can transform this inverted car. I can't paint on it. All the things. I could filter it. I could do smart filters, all that. Does that make sense to everyone? So I can actually go backwards, but I don't want to use undo because I want you guys to get this part. Double click on that smart object again. You'll notice that again, you have two images now unless you're using tab behavior. If you're using tab behavior, you should have two tabs now. But the car is now out now. It's not protected anymore. I just took it out of the smart object. Command I will invert it again. Click on the close box. Say, yes, I do want to save this. And I've got the car back in the smart object, protected again, and I'm ready to go. Yes?
Is there anything that an object can do outside of the smart, like when it's not a smart object? You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, wait, you're getting ready. We're heading for the mother load right now.
okay.
All right. So this next part is the most challenging. It is part of your homework. We have 20 minutes to get this done. I'm feeling good. I think we can do it. I need everybody on hyperdrive or on hyper attention now, whatever. This will change your life if you've never done this kind of stuff before. So I'm going to close up the car. You don't need to save it. And I'm going to go look at your files for week number 2. Okay, inside, I think it's inside your assignment folder. No, it's not. It's actually outside your assignment folder. There's a file in here called Bruce Fraser, copyright 2005. This is actually, unfortunately, Bruce is dead now. But anyway, if you double click on that, it'll open it up. It'll bring you into Camera Raw. And I need to make sure that you don't, because again, DNGs will remember any adjustments that have been made on this. And so to make sure that you are back the way it should, the way it was shot, unmodified, that there hasn't been anything done to it, if you look on the far right-hand side of your screen, there's 3 little dots that sit down at the very bottom. And if you click on that, you get a drop-down menu. And in that drop-down menu, you can come down to Reset to Default. And you should have a really pretty mediocre-looking picture of a castle. So in terms of how we need to then set up Photoshop to work with smart objects, because again, for me, that's always the default. Occasionally, there's reasons that I want to bring in a file that's not a smart object, but usually that's not the case. So to set up the preferences correctly, you can set it up using the little wheel that's up at the top on the right-hand side. But the easier method just for the smart object part that we need to talk about is you click on the hyperlink that's right underneath the image at the very bottom. There's a little hyperlink that says Adobe RGB, blah, 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 blah. If you click on that, it'll actually open you up to the correct page for this. And you can see that up at the very top, you should have color space, Adobe RGB, that's all correct. But at the very bottom, there's a Photoshop, open in Photoshop as smart object. If you check that and then say OK, the button that always said open in the lower right-hand side of this now says open object. And this will allow us to actually open this as a smart object. So I'm simply going to click on open object. I'm not going to make any changes yet. And you'll see it opens up this file, and you see you've still got that weird little icon that's in the bottom telling me that this is actually a smart object. But unlike the other, so the car, when we opened up the car, we converted that to a smart object in Photoshop. It took the car, it put it into the protective envelope, and we were good to go. We could do all the transforming, all of that kind of stuff. But what we've done now by creating a smart object coming out of camera raw is we've put a copy of our raw data into Photoshop inside of a smart object. Double click on the smart object now. You do not go into another image. You don't open an image out. You go back into camera raw. This is now a copy of your raw data that you can re-edit inside a Photoshop file. You've never been able to do that before. Does this make sense what's going on? Okay, so this gets really a whole lot more powerful. So I'm going to give you guys a set of numbers to process this file. Now, when I originally did this exercise was, I don't know, 4 or 5 versions of Photoshop ago, at least. And Photoshop, you guys, I'm sure you know this, as time has been going on, whenever they update Camera Raw, whenever they update Photoshop, they usually update Camera Raw. And a lot of times they update the processing engine. So most of you guys know that the basic controls that are over here, they didn't always look like this. There used to be a basic control that had highlight recovery. There is no recovery here. There was another one that was shadow. I mean, there was all sorts of things that were different in here. The values that I have got go with the older version. So we need to use a different version of Camera Raw to actually process this. So to do that, we are going to collapse the basic panel for a second, and we're going to come down to calibration, I hope. Nope, or not. Let's go back to basic. Oh, wait. Shoot. It's been so long since I've done this, I'm not going to remember where this thing is. Hang on. They've moved it. Come on. Oh, I'm sorry. It is in calibration. Never mind. I was right. It was in calibration. So go all the way down. So in the panel at the very bottom, there's a calibration. Click on the arrow to open it up. And in the process version, if you click on that, you'll see in my case, version number 5 is the process version. You need to go back to the version that existed in 2010. That's when I actually made that, and that is version number 2. So click on it, come down to version number 2. You're not going to have to do this for anything else, guys. This is just so that you get the right numbers and understand how smart objects work in here. I'm just processing this file the way I would in a copy of Photoshop from 2010. That's all I'm doing. So click on that, and then you'll notice in the basic panel as it drops down, this is completely different. We don't have, again, we've got fill light, recovery, we've got a bunch of different shit in here. This doesn't matter. It's just the numbers that I've got to make this quick. Make sense? Because I'm going to give you the numbers to fill in here. So we're going to start at the very top with color temperature. So I want you to select the color temperature, just drag across it at the very top. And I want you to put in these values. I'm going to give you the string of them. To go to the next step, you simply hit the tab key. So we're going to start at the very top. Color temperature, I want you to put in 6800, 6800. Hit the tab key. It will take you down to the tint. You can leave the tint at a +7. Hit the tab key. It will take you down to exposure. Put in -1. Hit the tab key. Come down to recovery. You need to leave that at 0. Hit the tab key. For fill, you need to leave that at 0. Hit the tab key. For blacks, I want you to take that to 18. Hit the tab key. For the contrast, I want you to take that to 81. Hit the tab key. For clarity, I want you to put it at 56. Hit the tab key. For clarity, 52. Hit the tab key. For vibrance, 35. Hit the tab key. For saturation, 0. So again, I'm going to run these down again really quick for you. The white balance, color temperature should be 6800. The tint, +7. The exposure, -1. Recovery, 0. Fill light, 0. Blacks, 18. Brightness, 81. Contrast, 56. Clarity, 52. Vibrance, 35. And saturation, 0. Are we good on this? All right, and I'm going to say OK to this. And you'll notice it reprocessed that file. Now, I am processing this just for the field. That's all this was processed for. But if you were to now, if I was to say to you now, but I want the sky to be really dramatic and dark, how would you do that? How do you guys dodge and burn? Go for it. I'm sorry, do what? The select what? Oh, you could quick select the sky, but then how would you make it darker? Curve? Or some people do soft light layers, some people do all of that. Worst thing in the world you can do. You've got all this raw data. Use it. So here's the trick, and if you don't pay attention to this, you're not going to do your assignment correctly, which you really want to do. I'm going to copy this file the way I just showed you before. Command J, I'm copy the layer, Command J. It makes a copy of it. You could have just you could also, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo it. You could just drag this down to the little icon at the bottom that's got the square with the plus in it. It would also make a copy of the layer. I'm going to then reprocess this layer. So double click on it to go back in. You'll notice it goes back in. We're only going to do one radical change on this because I don't want to spend too much time doing this. But watch this. I want you to take the exposure and drag it way down. Bring it down to like -3. Yeah, moody sky. I'm going to say -3 and I'm going to say OK to this. And look what happens. Both of those layers get reprocessed. And the reason that's happening is that these layers are both referring to a single smart object. That second layer is like an alias. It's just pointing to the smart object. There's only one smart object in this group right now. And because I just changed it, I set the exposure on it, it changes both of them. If I had 10 layers that were all referencing the same one, they would all look identical. That does not help me. I need to actually have one version of raw data to process for the field, one for the castle, and one for the sky. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to throw away the layer that's on top. Again, that is a clone of the smart object reference file. That's not a new set of data. To get to a new set, the only way you can do it, and this is the thing to remember, the only way you can do this is to come up to the Layer menu, down to Smart Objects, down to New Smart Object via Copy. Now, I personally think Adobe could come up with a much better way to phrase this, to really let you know what's going on. But nonetheless, they didn't. So anyway, go ahead and say New Smart Object via Copy. So again, look at my screen. Layer menu, Smart Objects, New Smart Objects. Everybody take out your phone and shoot a picture of this really quick. Again, this is the thing that will fuck you up. We good? And it looks like we did the exact same thing. This does not look any different at all, but it is. Double click on that top layer now. And I need a new set of values for you to put in here. So we're going to, again, start at the color temperature, drag across it. Yep.
When I do that, it doesn't pop up on it. If I go down to layers,
Hit cancel out of here. That's not a smart object, okay. So we're already in trouble. No, you need to go back to when we opened a smart object. Okay. Now, actually come down to the adjustments. Go ahead and edit contents. Click on that. So now you're there. So now up to layer. Down to smart object via copy. Okay, so I've got the second one in here. We're going to do this for the sky. So the values, again, I'm going to start at 4700 for my color temperature, 4700. Hit the tab key. You can still leave the tint at 7. Hit the tab key. For the exposure, a -1.5. Hit the tab key. For the recovery, 96. Tab key for fill, 0. Tab key for, so what? Oh, thank you. I probably wouldn't have taken that.
I got a question.
Shoot.
Are you doing this on the original one or the copy?
I'm doing it on the second layer. Tab key for fill light, sorry. Let me go through this again. Screwing my own stuff up, minus 96, yep, for the fill is at 0. Exactly. Tab key down to the blacks. For the blacks, 32. Hit the tab key for brightness, 60. Hit the tab key for contrast, 6. Hit the tab key for clarity, 100. Hit the tab key for vibrance, 0. Hit the tab key for saturation, also 0. So again, my values here are 4700 for the color temperature, 7 for the tint, minus 1.5 stops in exposure, 96 for the recovery, 0 for the fill light, 32 for the blacks, 60 for the brightness, 6 for the contrast, 100 for the clarity, 0 vibrance, and 0 saturation. And say OK. It's on the top layer we're doing that on, yes. So now you can see that I have got 2 versions of my raw data that are processed completely differently. If you go back to your original layer on the bottom and double click it, it still has all the values that we put in here the way we processed for this. If I hit cancel out of here and I double click on the one above it for the sky, it's got all of those. Tell me, how can you in Lightroom keep 2 sets of processings for a single raw file? You can't. Whatever you write or change overwrites whatever you had before. This way I can keep an endless number of raw data processed endlessly in a Photoshop file. I don't need my raw data anymore, it's in the file. Make sense? All right. Real quick, we're going to finish this part up. We might have time to get to the castle. If we do, we will, but I want to make sure we get at least to this part. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. So now we actually need to use a mask to actually blend these 2 together. So we're going to build one. I'm going to use Quick Selection Tool just because it's very easy to do it in the very beginning. So we need to talk about the Quick Selection Tool really quickly. Come on. It's 8 minutes away. I'm going to be on time. Give me a little chuckle. Anyway. Quick Selection Tool, thank you, very little. Quick Selection Tool, up at the tool palette, come down to the Quick Selection Tool. Again, you'll get a flyout. You want to make sure you pick the middle one, the Quick Selection Tool. Come over onto your screen, and again, you can use the bracket keys to actually make it larger or smaller. So I'm going to make mine a little bit about the size of a dime. The thing about the Quick Selection Tool is this. I know you can't even see it, right? Here, it's sort of like, I can't even get it. Anyway, this is it, sort of on the castle. Anyway, it's there. Just pick the Quick Selection Tool on your computer. You should be able to see it. Mine, if you want to know its actual size, it's 300 pixels. The thing about the Quick Selection Tool is this. It finds edges. That's all it does. It finds edges. So you cannot let the tool touch the edge you want to find. So I want to find the horizon of this. I cannot let the tool touch the horizon, because the minute it touches the horizon, it's going to start looking for an edge beyond the horizon. So you never let the tool touch what it is you really want it to pick. However, it picks edges based on contrast. And look at this image right now. There is no contrast in this. I mean, there's a little, but why make the tool work that hard? Turn off the eyeball for your top layer, your sky layer. Select the bottom layer to make it active. This is what we're going to use the Quick Selection Tool on, because the horizon is so much more pronounced, the difference between the horizon and the sky. Make the tools, give the tools a break. Give them the best environment you can give them to work. So I'm going to start at the very top. I'm going to just start to select, and I'm going to come down. I'm going to stay away from the castle. I don't want it to select that either. And it does a really quick selection of this, and I should be off to the races. So has everybody got the sky selected? Turn on the eyeball for your sky. Select the sky to make sure that we're going to apply the layer mask to the sky. And then if you look at your icons on the bottom of the layers palette, you're looking for the icon that looks like a white rectangle with a black circle in the middle. That is the Add Layer Mask icon, and simply click on it. And it adds the layer mask, and it puts these 2 things together. Try to do that with curves or a soft light layer. Don't ever dodge and burn any other way. You're reprocessing your file. Look at what we got out of that sky. There's no way you could pull that out with just working on a baked Photoshop file. Right? Okay, we're going to be ambitious here, guys. We're going to do one last one of these. So again, I am going to come up to my, I've got my top layer selected. I'm going to come up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects, down to New Smart Object via Copy. It's going to make a copy of my raw data again. It's going to be processed exactly like the old one. It's got this layer mask on it that I don't want, so I'm going to grab the layer mask and throw it away. While we're at it really quickly, I'm going to double click on the name of the bottom layer right here, and I'm going to call it Grass. I'm going to double click on the name for the one that's right above it, call it Sky. And then the very top one that we just made, I'm going to double click on the name and call it Castle. It makes a lot of sense to actually process your files correctly. I mean, name your files, your layers. It can get really confusing in this class. You can't believe how deep these things can get. I'm going to double click on the castle layer. It brings me back into Camera Raw. And these are the values that I want you to put in for the castle. For the color temperature, 6800. Tab key +7 is fine for the tint. Tab key -1.5 is fine for the castle part. Hit the tab key for recovery, 52. Hit the tab key for fill, 27. Hit the tab key for blacks, 16. Hit the tab key for brightness, 91. The tab key for contrast, 68. The tab key for clarity, 100. Tab key for the vibrance, 0. Tab key saturation, 0. So now I'm processing this just for the castle. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. And you can see now we've got the castles like laying on top. We've got the sky. I prefer to have the castle, I prefer to work my way from the bottom of the image up. So I would like the castle to be between these two. So I'm simply going to grab the castle layer and drag it down between the two layers, the sky and the bay or the grass. You'll see you get that little blue line, and if you let go, it'll put it right in there. So that part's actually fine. Actually, I take that back. Yeah, no, this is exactly where I want it. So now I need to make a selection of the castle. So I'm going to zip into the castle. My shortcut to get to the magnifying glass is spacebar command or spacebar control will give you the positive zoom tool. If you add the option key, it'll be the negative zoom tool. But so I'm going to zip back out just a little bit. Just the spacebar alone will give you the hand so that you can move this around. I've still got the quick selection tool selected. I need to make it much smaller because again, I'm going to select the castle, but you cannot let this touch any of the edges. So I'm going to start to work my way in. It's selected part of the greenery. Don't worry about that right now. I'm going to continue to work my way over. It's selected all of the castle, but it also selected part of the shrubbery and stuff underneath it. Hold down the option key. You will notice that the little plus sign in the middle of your quick selection tool changes to a minus, and then drag along the bottom edge. Again, don't touch the edge you want it to find. Let the tool do its work. And I'm just going to continue to drag back to get rid of all of that selection. This is a reasonably good selection of the castle. So again, I'm going to do the very same trick we did before. The castle layer is selected. I'm going to go down to the little square or the rectangle, white rectangle with the black dot in the middle. Click on that to add a layer mask. And now I'm going to double click the hand over in my toolbar to get the image as big as I can actually get it. And now I've actually processed the file. I've started with just the grass. I've added the castle, and then I've added the sky. And if you save this file and turn it in, you'll get 100 for this assignment. Yes?
Just selected, so selected the castle.
Yeah. All right, so you got it perfect. So then just, it's right there. Just click on that guy, and it'll add a layer mask. And you're good to go.
Okay.
Did this work for you guys?
Yeah.
Change your life. You want to talk about extreme dodging and burning? Your days of the dodge and burn tool are dead. You can't, I mean, this is just, and if you save this file, all of that raw data is saved in there. You can go back in here 2 years from now, open it up and reprocess it. It's insane. All right, So really quickly, guys, for the assignments, because we're done. So this is what the assignment is. Again, it's all on Canvas. It's also sitting right here. This is what I was talking to you about. There are 4 sets of shootings right here. I'm asking you to create a custom DNG profile for all 4. I'm asking you to actually apply that profile, to color balance that in addition to adding the profile, and basically turn in the file. Parametric dodging and burning is what it's called, what we just did. And you can see right here, assignment number 2-3 was parametrically dodge and burn the Bruce Fraser file. You've just, oh, sorry, it's not, it's, no, that's assignment 2-4 was the Castle file. Just turn it in. But you need to do the same thing. There's another file in here that you need to parametrically dodge and burn. And that means multiple smart objects that are holding multiple versions of your raw data that you are processing for specific areas. Are there questions about any of this? Yes? No, it does. It massively matters. Only thing that you turn files in this class are either Photoshop files or TIFF files, layered, unflattened. Now, you can't turn this stuff in on Canvas. You've got to bring these files next week, and we will go through the whole process of how you submit files to the server. So don't worry, I'll do the homework, bring it on a hard drive, and we will deal with all of that, because that's how it'll be every week, and then you guys will know. Yes?
I'll just ask you after.
Okay.
What did you say the other file we have to edit was?
There's another file in here. If you read the assignment, there's another file in here that'll tell you which file I want you to dodge and burn. It's this 20100007 car version 0302. So it's going to be this file right here. Nope, sorry, it's this one right here. So you'll see a little preview of it, maybe. It's that file. Remember, though, when we do this, this is a hint. What value for shadow detail did we come up with? 25-ish. That matters in how you process this guy. Don't worry, guys. Work on the file. That's not going to be a make or break it thing. But are there questions about any of this? I know this was a lot today. It's going to be a lot every day. I know you were hoping to say, oh, it gets so much easier from here. Fuck. All right. Did somebody wanted to talk about something after this class? Yeah.
Yeah, I just lost you on the steps. I just want to figure out how to.
Oh, okay. Let me kill the video, and well, I'll be right there.